On my maternal side, my family came, my mother and her parents came from a small village in what she calls the Crimea. Not that they felt they were Russian, not Ukrainians, although there were people that spoke Ukrainian, but they spoke Russian, and it was called Bolshoi-Takmak, which is about 60, 70 kilometers north of the Sea of Azov and the city of Berdyansk. We have visited there. When my uncles, my mother's two older brothers, became of age that they would have to go into the Tsar's army, my grandmother made the decision that her sons were not going to go into the army, and so she sent my grandfather with the two oldest boys to Montreal to get settled here. And my grandfather had a business in making farm machinery. And he had 8, 10 people working from him, from what I got from my mother. And my grandmother stayed and sold the business and sold the house. And then she packed up and came and joined my maternal grandfather. And my uncle, one uncle, and my grandfather found work with Canadian Pacific Railways, where they built their engines. It was called the Angus shops. And both my uncle and my grandfather were tool makers. They made the tools which were then used to manufacture. That's from their training in Russia, where they actually did this and built machinery for farming purposes, harrows and rakes and plows, and to be pulled by horses. So, but they were very much, my mother went to a school, she went to Aberdeen School for her English, but she learned her Yiddish at what was called the Yiddische Nationale Radikaler Schulen, which was the forerunner of the Yiddische Volksschulen and the Yiddische Peretzschulen. And she had not studied Yiddish in Russian, but here she learned in Yiddish. And because my grandmother and grandfather, once they were here, were speaking in Yiddish. And I grew up, we lived with my maternal grandparents, and we grew up. I was born in 1931, and I was bilingual. My grandparents was Yiddish, and my mother and father were in English, and communications with my siblings was in English. They didn't talk much about it other than to say, in der Heym. It was as though they were living in America, but the home was still in Russia, in der Heym, in the home. I mean, it didn't mean in the home, it meant the whole ethos of living in Bolshoi-Takmak. Also, my grandmother, who didn't make the attempt to learn either English or French, would always say, wenn ich wollte kein sehr sprach, wollte ich sie schon gesucht, which meant in her communication, if she could speak either English or French, she would tell them, whatever that telling was, because she never bothered to learn, but used my mother as the interpreter. But I grew up in a home where my father, we were a very committed family to our Jewish heritage. In all phases, in all of our ethos, it was there.